Matt, I just came up to you and you said, living the dream, brother.
Yeah.
Me too.
Right.
This is fun, right?
It's a good gig, man. It could be a whole lot worse. It could be sitting in the cubicle, you know.
You know, I shouldn't say I was shocked, but you're a highly intellectual fighter. You really are looking at how the human body works, how the mind works. But when you're preparing to fight on some level, you have to be thinking less. How do you bring that together?
First of all, thanks. I appreciate the compliment. Second, I'm very capable of compartmentalizing my mind, right? So I can turn it off. I can be reactive when it's time to be, and I can think my way through when I also need to be. So I don't think I've ever been conflicted on that since I stopped watching film. I think that was one of the biggest things was don't watch film as much as an individual. Let my team do it and prepare me that way.
I also noticed that when something goes right, when you do something, you take the credit deserved. But when something goes wrong, you take the responsibility. I think that's important to evolve as a martial artist.
Well, I think accountability is a pretty big thing, right? And like self-evaluation, like I said, my father's a psychiatrist, so I live in that self-evaluation zone. So I should do my best to be accountable, and there's nothing wrong with saying I made a mistake. I was at fault. There's nothing wrong with that at all.
When you and I talked about when you faced Bader, you were acknowledging how the choices that you made that led to the defeat, but then you really understand that made you a better fighter. No question about it. That fight and that experience made you a better fighter.
It did. I mean, it sucked. I mean, it's like, but you never know your mettle until it's tested. And like my last two fights, I've had my mettle tested. I've gone 3 rounds, and I've only gone 3 rounds. I think maybe twice before that. And it was a really unpleasant experience. But I know where my heart is. I know where my mind is. I think everybody else who watches it knows that there's no quit in me. And so, like, I don't get knocked out. So, unless you submit me, we're going all 3 rounds, and that's the way it's going to go.
And you're going to fight Bader again. You're going to circle back and fight him again. And when you do, you've learned the lessons. You've took the information that you needed from that fight.
If that ends up being the case, I learned a lot from it, and I think it would be a different fight. But I mean, he beat me handily. I mean, he beat me from pillar to post, and there's not much that I could do about that. So at that time, I learned some mistakes. I learned some things. I know that I talked to my wrestling coaches at Purdue that I didn't really work with for that camp, and I learned a couple of different things. I've been a lot more active with them. So if it ever comes up, we'll see. But I got myself a pretty big challenge this weekend. So.
When you were a young man playing football, did you imagine being in a cage fight with a Russian fighting legend?
Isn't that wild, man? Yeah. Like, no, obviously never. And it's weird that like he's so accomplished at what he's done, right? He's so accomplished, really like very similar to Fedor in that perspective, but he doesn't get the juice that Fedor does, and I don't really understand why. I mean, he's not as dynamic as Fedor was or is, but he's got so much power, and he's so good at what he does, and his record's great. So I don't know, man, but I mean, it's a huge challenge. He's a legend for certain, and it's if everything pans out and fights the way I believe it should be a tough fight, but I should come out a victory.
And the way it should is you moving your feet a lot more than him, making him miss and then touching him up.
That's no secret, right? The way I win is I'm mobile and I fight differently than most other heavyweights. I'm the anomaly. They're usually kind of similar. And as long as I can do that and maintain my mental stability, I should be fine.
It's a pleasure talking to you always, man. Have fun in there.
Appreciate it, man. Thanks.